Yeah, thank you a lot, Colette. Welcome to the second plenary panel discussion of this conference. I hope you feel positively nurtured by the food and also by the very rich buffet of project presentation that we just had. After this panel discussion this morning about the research of the ACCTING project, we are moving a step into the practical realm, let's say, from innovation to impact, and looking at the topic of commons, which is a topic that, if you will say so, that it hasn't been very present maybe at the very beginning of the project, that it kind of presented itself also through the research and also through the pilot actions. So as Mr. Tunsoya has said this morning, it's about the shared and also the essential foundations, resources of our society, nature, but in the ACCTING project also energy, food, mobility maybe, and around which communities basically organize to share these resources based on arrangements of rules and also maybe dedicated practices of commoning. So many different kinds of elements, and we will have a look at them together. Like, why do we think commons can be an essential element of just transition, of inclusive transitions? What are common barriers as well, and what are innovative practices to overcome them, and then maybe also how can they be promoted, safeguarded through certain kinds of policy innovations and partnerships. So those are the elements that we will tackle today with three great speakers. I would have hoped it would have been four. Mireia cannot be here. She would have given a great perspective on commoning of cycling in Barcelona that they did as a pilot action. But this means for the agenda of the plenary discussion that we will first have three initial presentations of three concrete projects as well. But it also means that afterwards we will have a bit more time. So already during the presentations, feel free to take down notes and also come in later with intervention, with experiences from your own work on commons or commons-related initiatives, and your questions, of course, as well. Exactly. And without further ado, I'm then very happy to first of all welcome Burcu Borhan Türeli, who is a researcher and project specialist for the ACCTING project at Sabanci University, and she's actually a literary scholar with a degree in interdisciplinary studies and also in English language and literature from the Sabanci University. And in her research, she explores actually children's literature, educational pedagogies, rural gender transformation, agri-food relationships, and sustainable food systems. So a wide range of topics. And yeah, she lives in Çanakkale in northwestern Turkey, near the Danel Strait, and will give us some insights into the ACCTING key insights around the commons. Welcome.
Okay, so I would like to start by first of all thanking everyone, especially Yellow Window, CERC and ESF and all research partners and researchers who have contributed to the project, and also for hosting us for this wonderful final conference. So my role in this session is to present how the outcomes, results of the ACCTING project intersects and resonates with the concept of commons and the commoning practices, and how those two talk to each other. And as far as, so we've listened to a lot of sessions and speakers, and so I can see that many of the insights I will pass on to you, I will describe now in a couple of minutes, will complement what has already been said. For example, referring to Marina, the emphasis on the community building, long-term trust-based relationships, and intertwined relationships with the commons and the public interests, our keynote speaker also emphasized. Right. So the ACCTING research, So the ACCTING research explored how bottom-up initiatives and projects, whether they are emerged through autonomous community actions or were facilitated by municipalities, have influenced behavioral change towards a more gender and just, socially just environmental transition. What became clear throughout the ACCTING project and the research is that even though these initiatives weren't always explicitly described as commons, by the initiators and the participants, many of them reflected commoning practices. And these practices, we found, hold transformative potential to drive more just, inclusive, and grounded transitions at the individual, collective, and organizational levels. So the research itself documented a growing number of commons ranging from rural to urban settings, and those include community gardens, food and energy cooperatives, and bike collectives. These initiatives often emerge as grassroots responses to the multi-layered climate crisis. And we see that people come together to address shared challenges by revitalizing or drawing on traditional commons practices and knowledge. And this points a powerful resurgence. Communities are reactivating commons-based practices, some of which had been sidelined or forgotten, as viable, sustainable responses to contemporary ecological and social challenges. In the face of the climate crisis, they demonstrate that collective action and cooperative resource management remain vital tools for building resilience and just futures. Through shared governance, participatory decision-making, and practices of collective care, commons create spaces where individuals can access vital resources such as food, energy, land, and mobility. But more than providing material access, these spaces enable people to raise their voices, co-create solutions, and reclaim agency over their lives and their communities. Commons position them as not merely recipients of aid or passive policy subjects, but they became active agents of transformative change. This is something that has been emphasized very strongly so far. And this shift is particularly powerful in contexts shaped by deep structural inequalities and limited public infrastructure. As the acting research highlights, commons are not just practical strategies for survival or meeting basic needs, but they're also political practices that foster empowerment, cultivate care, and sustain resilience. So you can see the key insights on the slide as well. I would like to start with the first one. Across several case studies, commons and commoning emerge as a way of defending life spaces, defending life and land from activities such as extractivism and caring for nature collectively. This is mainly because people, or commoners if we call them, are deeply integrated with the land they inhabit. Defending the forest or protecting nature means defending their right to exist, their right to survive. For example, in Turkey, women villagers possesses ancestral knowledge of the forest, water resources, and traditional land use practices, which helps them to take active frontline roles in wildfire prevention, including nomadic herders involving animal grazing and controlled burning, which have historically been used to decrease wildfire risk. But also when state support falls short in protecting life spaces, groups step up, taking collective responsibility and using shared resources to defend their territories. For instance, in Sweden, a group in Ljusdal, emerging from a local Facebook group, organizes direct volunteer efforts and resources to protect their local environment from forest fires without relying on state support. Similarly, in Italy, citizens' committees formed after floods to self-educate, monitor threats, maintain waterways and green spaces, and advocate for better support from authorities. We also seen and observed in the project that commons provide an important foundation for climate justice movements. As documented in the project, some solidarity actions nurtured in the commons have gradually transformed into national or even international social movements, expanded fields of struggle where social justice increasingly intersects with climate justice. One powerful example is the Akbelen forest struggle in Turkey, where small farmers and forest villagers came together to resist coal mining operations threatening their forests and villages. Through forest watch camps, grassroots associations, and collective action, the community transformed their local ecological knowledge into political agency. Their fight became a national symbol, connecting local struggles to wider calls for climate justice and forest protection. Similarly, villagers in Bulgaria organized collectively against a planned limestone quarry since they were worried about the pollution, water shortages, or the impact on their livelihoods and the risk the quarry posed to a nearby UNESCO heritage site. Another insight: through intergenerational workshops and the revival of traditional practices, Commons act as a living archives of ecological wisdom, connecting past knowledge with present needs to shape resilient place-based responses to climate crisis. The research reveals that mostly women and older community members of the commons often act as keepers of cultural and ecological knowledge. For example, in Romania, elderly locals pass on small-scale farming and livestock care knowledge to younger generations. And in Turkey, the Sarıkeçililer community draws on generations of lived experience to exactly when and where to graze their animals. Their deep knowledge of seasonal cycles, water resources, and animal behavior helps maintain a sustainable ecological balance with nature. Similarly, a project based in Barcelona turns everyday engagement with nature into acts of protecting nature-based commons through spring stewardship practices such as mapping, cleaning, and restoring springs. Also, we have examples from urban contexts, and in an agroforestry project in Lisbon, low-income people, elderly people, immigrants, and women collectively transform a degraded space into an agroforestry area where different age groups learn from each other, accompanied by older participants often holding traditional ecological knowledge. Another insight, co-learning as a form of collective action in the commons. So several commons cultivate collective agency and resilience in their safe co-learning spaces where individuals not only share resources, material resources, but also build knowledge together. This collective knowledge building process strengthens the community's ability to act together and shape their future. For example, in Sweden, the Prepping Together initiative shifts crisis preparedness from an individual responsibility to a community effort. And it supports local networks to create study circles where people share their experiences and learn from each other, guided by local leaders. Similarly, in Portugal, the Natura Observa project brings together volunteers with different levels of experience. They work side by side on habitat restoration and species monitoring, exchanging knowledge and learning as they go. When it comes to mobility justice and policies, redesigning public spaces with safer bike routes opens the door to new commoning practices, making streets possible for connection and agency. In this respect, Belgium's School op de Teller initiative offers a compelling example. It goes beyond a typical bike-to-school program by actively involving children in identifying issues, using traffic data collected from their neighborhoods, and collaborating to redesign their school's environment to present their solutions to local authorities and traffic planners. Communal bike repair shops are another example from the research where communities come together to care for shared infrastructure. For example, bikers collaborate to repair bicycles using recycled parts, donations and volunteer labor in bike kitchens in Italy and Portugal. Similarly, in Lisbon, the Cis Lopez initiative offers free repair services and donated bikes to those in need, making the resources available to everyone who needs them. Participating, so this time energy communities, participating in community energy commons helps people learn together and build sustainable energy practices and improve their energy literacy. For example, in Italy's 8 Minuto dal Sole initiative, participants engage in meetings and environmental events where they learn to read energy bills, reduce energy costs, and adopt energy-saving behaviors. In another energy community, a local energy grid has been created where renewable energy powers the local schools and surplus energy is distributed to 30 households in social housing. When we look at, as a last research area, when we look at the food commons, we see gardening becomes more than a subsistence activity. It transforms into a space for empowerment and resilience. For instance, the Garden of Encounter in Austria, initiated by a local NGO, allows refugees and immigrants to grow culturally familiar food, fostering both social integration and economic independence. Similarly, the municipality-led urban gardening initiative in Izmir, Turkey. So, another insight. Commons promote democratic participation and support the development of self-organizing tools, such as citizen panels, assemblies, organizing protests, and creating petitions. Although reaching consensus on shared goals or formulating joint proposal within commons-based initiatives can be challenging and not always easy, the research shows that commons can foster separate agencies, articulate collective demands more effectively, and engage in substantive dialogue with policymakers. The acting-funded communing cycling project by ACCI in Barcelona brings together diverse groups, cycling activists, climate action groups, and feminist collectives and policymakers, forming an inclusive coordination group of over 15 members. The project fosters collaborative problem-solving to remove barriers to accessible cycling, especially for women. By working together to localize the European Declaration on Cycling, their work invites us to rethink streets and roads and sidewalks and spaces currently occupied by privately owned vehicles as public spaces. In situations where policymakers often do not actively involve citizens in the design or implementation of car-free policies, the research also shows that when citizens self-organize and voice their concerns, they can drive policy changes or even suspend such policies, including well-intentioned car-free ones. Last insight. Reclaiming space collectively enables the reconstruction of shared values and social relations beyond market logics, fostering a culture that views access to commons such as land, energy, food, and mobility as a collective rights central to the climate justice movement. By organizing social kitchens and workshops on food sovereignty, Parvolorides in Greece actively engaged community members in shared activities related to food and food waste reduction. This collective engagement leads to the reconstruction of shared values around food, moving from a commodity to a basis for community solidarity and mutual support. Another compelling example is the municipality-led urban gardening initiative, which transforms a neglected space into a hub of care and solidarity in Izmir, Turkey, as part of the Neighborhood Gardens project. This project not only increases access to healthy food in disadvantaged areas, but also empowers women through trust-based collaboration. Participants are all women who actively engaged in rights-based workshops offered in the garden, sharing everyday life experiences and fostering a sense of community. Also in Stockholm, Sweden, the food initiatives documented in the research represent a form of food and care commons. In these bottom-up efforts, communities come together to share resources such as rescued food, addressing food insecurity, and reducing waste. So this type of commoning revolves around collective action, mutual aid, and shared responsibility, where individuals volunteer their time and effort to manage food distribution and care for vulnerable populations. The community-driven efforts to repurpose food and provide essential services to others highlight the practical and everyday forms of commoning that fosters resilience and social support. Lastly, as the acting research has so far shown, commoning practices initiate social organization and construct alternative ways of living precisely from where they are rooted, shaping them for today, not as a future project. So when people are genuinely empowered and given responsibility from the bottom up, whether to protect the forest or grow their own food, as seen in many research cases, they bring valuable local knowledge, cultural insights, and practical experiences to the transition process. When individuals feel ownership and a sense of involvement through their engagement with commoning practices and the commons, they are more likely to remain committed to the transition process and continue contributing to innovations that promote justice and sustainability. So as a result of the co-creative process during the final Open Studio we had, so you heard a lot about the Open Studios, the two fact sheets, Common for All and Policy Innovations to Promote Commons, were developed, and the documents share key insights and recommendations for supporting commons-based approaches in both policy and practice, and you can they are publicly available on the ACTING website. Also, the photographs are taken by Ayşegül, so thanks for them. And yeah, so this is the end of my presentation.
Thanks a lot, Burcu, for this very rich evidence for commoning practice within the ACTING project. Yeah, some words that really stuck with me are like agency, collective rights, collective action as well, and creating space for co-creation and different kind of needs, and also collective provisioning maybe. So maybe we can keep some of them for later. And now it's my pleasure to welcome Sophie Bloemen. She's a political economist and the co-founder and director of the Commons Network, so a real expert on the topic. She's an advocate and organizer. She has worked extensively on the democratization of the economy and on public civic partnerships, and developed ideas and projects for post-growth economies. She also coordinated different kinds of alliances of civil society organizations, including a platform and incubator for the community economy in Amsterdam, which she will talk more about now. Looking forward to that, Sophie.
Thanks so much. Let me see, I'm going to put a little timer for myself so that I don't talk too long. I have a tendency to talk too long. So, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for having me here. I'm really happy to be here and I hear about all these projects on commoning. And to get an opportunity to work on, to talk about our work. Maybe to see how the slides are doing. Jannis has already introduced a bit. Commons Network is a think tank and collaborative, and we are working on models for new economy, very much inspired by the model of the commons and by commoning. And we work with social movements, governments, different levels of government, so both locally, but we also work nationally, and we also work in European policy. So we spread ourselves quite thin, I can say. But we've been putting a lot of work locally in the last years, in Amsterdam mostly. And we're mostly based in Amsterdam now, but we have a lot of people in our network that are based across Europe and even globally. Our focus is a little bit has become quite economic, and this is an image which kind of illustrates the current economy, this economy, or dominant economy, so to say, because we can also see there is actually a lot of other things happening. But this economy focused on growth and individual success, which is, can be illustrated by this idea of this endless ladder that we are climbing, this ladder to nowhere. We think about what this other economy looks like, what it could be, what it needs to be. And recently we had a few days where we had lots of conversations, quite deeply and stimulating, also partly because Professor Jason Hickel, this degrowth academic that you might be familiar with, was in town in Amsterdam and The Hague, and we organized quite a few events with the parliamentarians, with the ministry, with unions, civil society, and then at the end we kind of wrote up this think piece and have this with this image also illustrates. And fortunately the quality is not great, but of course there's finance plays a big role. We work, of course, and you can say a lot about that and how we can reorganize that to nudge or invest in a different kind of economy. But it's also for us, it's very interesting to look at this market space and this decommodified space, and how we organize that. That on the one hand, we want to change the way the market space looks like, where we want to maybe have post-capitalist firms, cooperatives, and steward-owned and worker-owned companies that have either share resources or have purpose as the center of their decision making, but also how to mobilize more into the decommodified space, which I think some of the examples that were just shared about commoning are very much part of. But which also includes universal public services and this, care economy, commoning, and the different forms of social economy. So this is just a little bit of a kind of high-over idea, and just to say, we need to achieve that. We need actions on many different levels. Policy level at different levels of government. There's a lot that needs to be done. But we in Amsterdam we have been focusing a lot on building this community economy. And what is this community economy? Well, it's in Dutch it's actually called gemeenschapseconomie, which is quite nice because it has both this idea of the gemeenschap, which is community, which refers maybe to a smaller community, but it also has the idea of society in there. Gemeenschap can also be the society as a whole. So I guess there's something like Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft for the Germans, right? It's all in that word. So it has, and we have found that it has resonated quite a lot with people. So of course, if you talk about commons, you're going to reach some people, but not so many. If you talk about gemeenschapseconomie, we see that a lot of doors have been opening with communities, with politicians, with policymakers who say, okay, I can feel intuitively what this means. We're talking about an economy that serves communities, that is in service of communities, that is also governed by communities, and how we have defined it is really, and it's not just up to us to define it. Of course, there's also literature about community economy in English, but it's really about democratic process, about shared ownership, and about being regenerative, non-extractive, so to adding value to your locality, and being locally rooted. So this is, so as Jannis already mentioned, we started with different organizations in the city. We started a meent co-op. A meent co-op basically means it's an association, and it was also after a long process, so it's now an association that both has the word commons and co-op in it. So it's an association for commons co-op, meent co-op. And we have neighborhood centers, energy transition initiatives, a university, think tanks, so it's very mixed, and we're also open to membership, also for individual membership. So it's really about starting a collective, which is an association. And here we, and I have a slide on that. So we do different things. We're a knowledge hub, an accelerator for this neighborhood collectives and entrepreneurs and civil servants. We try to build this new ecosystem, so we support cooperatives, but we also try to build new institutions, so to say. We also work on the digital aspect. And we are a partner for community wealth building. And when you talk about community wealth building, I think that's a very relevant strategy when you talk about just transition. Community wealth building is an economic strategy that originally pioneered in Cleveland in the USA, and later also was applied successfully in cities in the UK like Preston. And it aims to create a local cooperative economy by redirecting procurement and financing to locally owned enterprises and cooperatives specifically. And the approach is adopted both bottom-up as well as top-down, as it has been embraced, and in Amsterdam has been embraced by parts of the municipality and has been spreading across the city. And there's a few programs that engage with specific neighborhoods, which have a lot of marginalized communities, and just in general face a lot of challenges. And so when we talk about commoning and just transition and kind of social action, what this community well-building program does, and I don't have time to explain all the different aspects of it, but one important part of it is really to go out there and support communities to become economic agents, to organize themselves in an emancipatory project and organize themselves economically and have, economic means and power in that as well. Community well-building is doing that, and Maincoop, as an incubator for community economy, we run different programs, and we do a lot of also like events and this narrative building and networking, but we also are a partner in this community well-building program of the municipality, where we take really also another approach than the municipality, so it's also kind of like finding each other, so to say, not always agreeing on everything. So think about, it's about green cooperatives, for example, cooperatives that take over the work on the grass and the plants in a certain neighborhood, but have citizens, like have people, neighborhoods, how do you say that? So people from the neighborhood do that, who might not have a job before that, who might have been out of the labor market. Neighborhood co-ops that engage different things, but also like cleaning, catering. So that's what this community well-building program tries to do. It tries to redirect wealth, money to these marginalized communities through basically starting up cooperatives. And we've encountered some challenges. I see that over my time is there, but we've encountered. I wanted to go into some challenges very shortly that we can that we have encountered. So there is, if you try to do this, if you try to build this cooperative economy, right? There's especially in these neighborhoods, there's a lack of cooperative skills. There's a lack of support systems. There's a lack of training, finance, guidance, ecosystem. There's a fear of losing benefits with many of the people who want to maybe enter into this cooperative and start doing this catering as a women's collective. And there's really the benefit system is really not helpful, the way it's organized. And the tendering issue. So a lot of this can be done, of course, with leveraging the tendering, the procurement from the city. Like, where are you gonna get your catering? Or even local hospitals or something, right? Semi-public institutions. Where are you gonna get your catering? How are you gonna organize your green work? The work on the plants around the city. The tendering process is also complicated, and it's not oriented towards these partnerships with local communities. And what we see as an underlying kind of transversal issue in all these challenges is the lack of recognition of the essential role that community plays in our economies and societies. Okay, this is something I don't have to explain this audience, but this is really something we encountered, because what we really see is that we need this social cultural change also within the institutions, and this issue has generally resulted in the kind of the erosion of collective and cooperative skills, and with Maincoop, so as Maincoop as an association, as an intermediary, we try to address this in multiple ways. By organizing ourselves also collectively, so we also have to relearn these collective skills. It's not easy for all these kind of semi-professional organizations to then start sharing stuff. So we're living it, we're doing it. And by providing this supportive organization and intermediary, which is imbued with these cooperative, solidaristic, and democratic ethic and processes, so that we can also correctly, or in the way that is helpful, support the community economy, and both in hard skills of kind of finance and business and getting your company, maybe your cooperative out there, but also in the soft skills of kind of attitude and outlook. And I think this last part is the hardest. Thank you.
Building collective skills. Okay, nice. Thanks a lot for that. And for the last initial presentation, I'd like to welcome Dimitra Papaioannidou. Now I can say Papaioannidou, exactly, who is an environmentalist. She has a master's in environment and development of the National Technical University in Athens, and she's also an educator with a teaching competence certificate, and combining the two in projects of environmental awareness and education, including as a project manager at the EcoMuseum Zagori in Greece, where she leads community-driven initiatives focused on biodiversity and cultural heritage. And she will present the acting pilot action Ecoversity that you already had a very, very small bite of. So welcome, Dimitra.
Hello again. I know my name is complicated even for Greek, so don't worry. Thank you. Yes, I'm here to talk to you about, you had a bit of a first taste from the pitching, but I will continue more in depth about Ecoversity, the pilot project of ACCTING. And I'm here on behalf of EcoMuseum Zagori, which is in northwest Greece, and it's a social cooperative enterprise. So as we all know, I think that all rural areas face biodiversity loss and, of course, rural marginalization. And especially in mountainous regions, like where EcoMuseum Zagori acts, are even more left behind, let's say, especially in countries like Greece, where a lot of focus is given in the coastline and the islands. So mountainous areas exist as well, and they face a lot of struggles, and they have a lot to offer at the same time. We work a lot with transhumance practice. For those who might not be very familiar with this term, it refers to the seasonal movement of livestock, where animals are moved from for the summer in the mountains, where there is more food and better weather, and in the winter they move to less mountainous areas for the same reasons, for the food and the better weather. So in our area, especially in the region of Epirus in Greece, the traditional pastoral communities face depopulation and, of course, economic decline. And at the same time, biodiversity, but in general, rich landscapes are abandoned. But still, those communities have a lot of traditional local knowledge that is very vital for preserving the natural and cultural ecosystems of an area. And that's why we believe that the local communities should really become the center and protagonists of the changes. So most specifically about Ecoversity, it's an innovative participatory project that works for the biodiversity and cultural preservation of the area of Epirus and specifically in Zagori. It is a bottom-up approach, as well as our whole organization as EcoMuseum Zagori follows this kind of approach. We are people that come from this area, live in the area, act there. So we are deeply connected with the communities, and we face ourselves the same challenges. So what we wanted was to engage the transhuman breeders as co-managers of the biodiversity, with a very vital role they play. Treat the biodiversity, knowledge, landscape, and pastoral tradition as commons. Build partnerships between the scientific community with the local citizens. That's why we implemented some biodiversity recording workshop, mapping, soundscape, and workshops that I will talk to you about. And that's how we wanted to revive traditional commons practices for a modern just tradition. Of course, commons offer a different, inclusive, participatory, and resilient model. Just so you have an idea of what I'm talking about, what we did in Ecoversity, we implemented some community-driven actions. We marked marked and mapped a trail of transhumans. We implemented participatory BioBlitz workshop for the recording of the biodiversity on those pastoral routes. with the help, of course, and collaboration with the University of the closest city, which is Ioannina, and with the help of local breeders, a local social cultural association of the villages that are very close to the trail. And of course, with the help of students, citizens, and local people from the area. At the same time, we also implemented some sound walk to record and map the biodiversity through acoustic ecology in these trails. A great part of the ecoversity was the educational programs that we implemented for younger ages for children. And a very strong focus was given to the role of local women that are connected to transhumans, as they play a very vital role in preserving the cultural heritage of transhuman and moving it to the next generations from their mother to their daughters. That's why we implemented some workshop for the creation of products made by natural elements, specifically with the use of wool. And later we showcased those creations in mobile exhibitions, where we also showcased some videos that we created, some video interviews from women from the transhumanist community, so they can have a space and some time to share their part concerning transhumans. So some key innovations. There is, of course, the commons of knowledge, coming very straightforward to our theme of the sessions. Through the participatory workshops, we collected and shared the data about biodiversity through community science, as I explained. And locals this way became co-researchers, if I may say, and not just some kind of subject that we wanted to, let's say, research, but they took very active role on the whole project and the workshops. There is the commons of stewardship that I think is really important because all those pastoral routes are treated as shared ecological heritage and not just some abandoned and forgotten wastelands. And there is a commons of participation, where the workshops that we implemented empowered communities to document and monitor the local biodiversity. Through this project, Ecoversity, we saw that those marginalized rural communities, like the transhumans community, the women, young people in the mountainous area, that there are not many left, are and can be agents of these chains, not obstacles. But they have the knowledge, and they are the ones that are there and will continue to be there, so they can act to change things. So we saw that the shared ecological governance can revive local economies and natural ecosystems. Common-based innovation strengthens resilience, knowledge, and voice for those excluded, like, for example, the woman that I was talking to you about, and we saw very clearly through the interviews we implemented and recorded on the videos. And of course, as a concept of this project was very strong, the connection that biodiversity conservation has with the environmental, but also with the social justice. Some main impact that we've achieved is that we increased the biodiversity awareness to children, to locals, documented and mapped the trails, enhanced the community awareness about the connection that the local traditional practices play in maintaining the natural environment and the cultural heritage of the area. empowered the local breeders, transhuman breeders, promoted the cultural heritage of transhumans. Of course, through educational programs, had an educational impact on the younger ages. We created some collaborative networks between breeders themselves, but also local communities with the scientific communities that I told you, with the university, with teachers, etc., but also with stakeholders like the municipality. With a lot of empowerment of women and acknowledgement of their role. And we, of course, keep ongoing research of the biodiversity data and awareness that we collected. Of course, there was challenges. Here is just a few. It's really hard to engage all age groups, but we try to use some hands-on activities, and that's why we collaborated with schools and university. It's also really hard to balance scientific approaches with local knowledge. Of course, I think you can understand when there is a breeder talking with a researcher, a student, or a teacher, is having a bit of hard time to really communicate. But I think once this step is went forward, there is a lot of collaborative work that can be done. And the innovation was that we blended the traditional knowledge with digital tools like the ecology application that I forgot to mention, that those maps that we created of the Transhumans Trail were later put on the application for Android that we have. So someone, a tourist, a visitor of the area, can go in a trail, see the map, and find all this data of the biodiversity we collected, even can have a look at the interviews that we had, and they can all be found in this application. And also the creation of videos that were also on the application, but also in the exhibition that we implemented. And some key lessons, it's that, let me know if I'm too long, because I don't have the time, was that, of course, local traditional knowledge was mentioned, I think, many times, is really essential for ecological innovation. These breeders and the local communities hold very important environmental and cultural knowledge that should be firstly recognized and then integrated. I think that commons, as so through Ecoversity, thrive when culture and ecology are linked. Protecting biodiversity is more successful when tied to local cultural practices rather than imposed external models. Of course, always in this kind of things, flexibility and adaptation are really crucial. Commons must adapt to local realities, which is it's really important, and not like we mentioned before about the bottom-up approach, but of course supported from top to bottom. Empowering local voices strengthen resilience. We saw that when those communities are given recognition, they become more powerful stewards of their environmental and social resilience. And of course, as I said, scientific and citizen knowledge can be synergetic in collaboration. And like this kind of scientific methods we used of biodiversity sound recordings and data recording in general, and local observation can enhance each other in a collaborative way. I think that's what I had to ask. I hope I didn't make it too tired. Thank you very much.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for this very rich presentations that I think cover already quite a lot of the questions that we also asked at the beginning. Let me still like maybe poke a bit deeper into certain of them, and I will let you breathe first after your presentation. Ask Sophie. I mean, as a Commons network, you decided to really focus on this concept or this organizational form of the Commons. Why? Why? And what do you think? Why is it so a fruitful kind of way of thinking, and why does it have potential to really foster just transitions? What makes the Commons? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it was a very conscious decision. I mean, obviously, it's the name of your organization, but it was. So we started around 10 years ago, and then we were working in the kind of NGO policy environment. Me and the co-founder David Hammerstein in Brussels mostly, and we were working a lot on knowledge management, and access to medicines and intellectual property. Which privatizes knowledge, right? And then, well, one of the things we encountered was that we thought that a lot of the language of justice was very much the language of human rights, which is the most important justice language that we have, and it's vital. But we found it also had limitations, and we thought we needed an approach that's more collective, and that's less about the right to get something once it's there. From our experience, for example, knowledge, right? Like, oh, I want to be able to read those books, but there's copyright. I want to be able to have access to those medicines, but there's patents, which are enclosing knowledge, making it scarce. But this language of human rights, I have a claim to these, like, or people in the global south, or people who don't have money for medicine. Instead of, why don't we felt like we needed to have an approach which was more collective, but also which was more about systems change, which was more about how we produce the knowledge and steward the knowledge in the first place. Like, why are we in this situation that we have to claim from this production system? So we came on this idea of the knowledge commons and a pool of knowledge, and how can you share it collectively? So that's kind of how we really felt there was, and I think now we're 10 years further and it's different already, the landscape has changed, but we really felt the human rights-based language was limited. Yeah. And about just transition, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it connects in many ways. Mm-hmm. It connects in many ways, and I think it's. I mean, how of course, the commons have often. I mean, I think these examples are all kind of illustrating the opposite. But what a lot of times in I think maybe then Western Europe, or I don't know, like the commons have also been associated with. Kind of exclusionary, right? Oh, the commons are something of, yeah, or like people who are able to do this, who have the possibility. It's yeah. I think it's really important to always have this just transition perspective, and always think about how can you make sure these things are possible for everyone. Yeah. Let me just keep it there.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Yeah, maybe let's stay at this question of inclusivity then, because yeah, I mean, many times commons are also understood as being inclusive inherently, but obviously there's also questions of access and questions of resources, like how far you can actually participate and so on. And maybe that's a question to all of you. What do you think? How can you foster inclusivity in commoning practices, maybe also from your experience and your projects?
One, two. So I think the key to all these commoning processes is to empower the people. Like on our case, we work with the women of transhumans. And I think once they are acknowledged, their work and everything, you can see that they take a pride, and this pride, like they feel that they are acknowledged, and then they have this pride that makes them, let's say, feel important, but also that it's their job to continue their work. So this is what comes, I think, to the common stewardship that we were talking about Yeah, I think that's a main.
I would say, I mean, it more depends on the personal observation. I mean, the research we did in the field, but also I think when we look at the research across different research lines, I think inclusivity is still a very difficult component of the whole process. Because when we look at the cases as well, the ones that are, I mean, for some cases it's difficult to find commons or commoning practices that includes or that are initiated by a group of vulnerable populations on themselves, or in other cases, there are commons that are, let's say, in energy commons, for example, there's initiated by families, but including one part of the vulnerable population. So I think it is still a very challenging component, but I think we can observe that when the state support is there to include, or there is a real willing, genuine will to add vulnerable populations to, you know, in commoning practices, we see more effective, innovative practices there. But when, yeah, and so, yeah, that's all, I guess.
Yeah, maybe too. So, and yeah, I think on the one hand, we shouldn't, like, there's also this idea of the participation society, like we shouldn't forget public services, like there should never be a focus on like kind of allowing for like, and facilitating commons and then kind of retreating in public services. So I think this is always very important to really keep the public services part there, which also allows other people, which allows for people to maybe also have the opportunity to engage in other things than taking care of their basic needs. But I guess, and I think I made this point as well in the presentation, where I tried to make, is that what we, this inclusivity for us is basically also what drives us to have this incubator and which drives this community well-building program. It's like, we can't just think it's gonna emerge like that. We have to go out there and support. I mean, this is a little bit more about democratization of the economy as well, but very inspired on the commons model of shared ownership, shared governance, you know, empowerment, collaboration. You have to go out there and support it. You have to like put, it's like, there's a lot of, just to give one example of how we think about this, like the Department of Economic Affairs in Amsterdam, where there's more than 100 people working. They have a lot of people working on startups, on reining it, like putting out the red carpet for big companies, but also for startups, having incubator programs for startups. And what is the goal? The goal is to then sell them to investors and, I don't know, extract all the value that is created. It's like, and why don't we have 20 of those 100 people working on an economy that serves the community, right? Why don't we have startup programs for these for commons that also create value, social value? That, so it's so we feel like there's a big role for the state, but also for intermediaries to create support systems to allow different communities to become more empowered in their commons or to start commons. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, the role of government, so to say. Yeah, maybe if you don't mind, let's stay with that for a second, and I'll ask you right away, from your experiences, what are the key challenges of these kind of commons-based organizations, and how can these kind of more collaborative aspects with policy, with the local governments and so also look like, so that it's not only the communities and civil society organizations that are jumping in, but maybe in a collaborative effort.
Yeah, so I guess I named some, like the, I think the main challenge, like I said, is really this recognition of the value of community by institutions as well, and which manifests itself in many different ways, like you know, oh yeah, we'll give like a small project subsidy instead of really going to a partnership, or the criteria are not okay, but then it's an interpretation of maybe European rules or something, right? So and then I think, so for these, but now, for example, in Amsterdam, and I think also in other cities in Europe, because originally it's actually an Italian concept, I think this idea of public-civic partnerships, they talk about it, it's in their policy projects, pages maybe, or it's like, but then the implementation, so they want it, and they kind of, but the implementation of it through the departments, with the civil servants, with the new projects, it's just really hard, because it really means a change. So it just, I think its main challenge is, is you have to be persistent and you have to give it time. That's maybe the challenge.
Dimitra, do you want to add something from your experience about also challenges maybe in that realm or generally also?
Yes, for sure. The collaborations that should be created between NGOs, institutions, local communities, and all the stakeholders, researchers. This is a challenge for sure, and I think it's really important to overcome this. And through Ecoversity, we saw that once you bring all these different people together, there is a lot of more fruitful outcomes. So yeah, that is a big challenge, as I explained on my presentation, to bring these people together and manage to make them collaborate. But I think it's something really important. Then yeah, I think that's something.
Yeah, you spoke about this, like it really stuck with me, this kind of leveraging cultural knowledge and traditional knowledge for like a modern just transition, and how these different kind of knowledges also conflict.
It's conflict, but I think in the base it's very connected, and what I think the conflict there is mostly on the people, okay. and maybe on the part that like big institutions should acknowledge that the local communities hold this knowledge. But I think Europe is going towards there, slowly in Greece as well, and we hope that we will see it happening.
Great, yes. I will open for questions in a second, so already think about the remarks and questions that you want to put in. Maybe Sophie, because you also talked, well, before you also talked about policies, and we're also in Brussels, so maybe you also want to say something about what do you think, like what are inspiring policy initiatives that you already see to promote this kind of commons, and what kind of policy recommendations or change would you like to see? It's an easy question, I know.
I mean, I think one of the examples, I don't know how, then it's again about the implementation, but for example, the right to challenge, if you're familiar with it, it's I think it's originally a UK policy, which is now also in the Netherlands, has been implemented in some of the municipalities. The right to challenge is the idea that a group of citizens, a community can challenge the tender, can like say, oh, there's tenders coming out for, I don't know, cleaning the area or something, or taking care of some resource in the city, and then there is specifically a right to challenge from a group of citizens, which is tailored for, to basically empower groups of citizens to take part in these tendering processes. So that's I think a good policy, which is also being used. There is also a policy, for example, in the tendering that you can say, this is all local stuff, right? Like there needs to be a social return. And this is now part of Amsterdam policy, but it's again, not implemented in the way I would think it's good, but so that when you get, when you win a tender, you are going to do maybe for millions, they're huge projects, right? I think there's billions spent by Amsterdam City, for example, per year. You have a social return clause, so you have to give a certain percentage, I think 1%, to in some way giving back to the city through social programs, or I would say, why don't you give it to a fund, which they can then support the sort of economy we want to see, right? That's so these are I think steps in the right direction. And yeah, I would like to see these funds being set up where money is being spent on a certain conditions really to support the economy we'd like to see. I also know there's going to be a revision of the procurement directive coming up at the European level. So that is a great opportunity to make it a little bit more common, so to say, very shortly, right?
Community economy, yes.
Community economy, yeah.
Thanks a lot. Do we have any questions, experiences to be shared? There's one here. Maybe.
Thank you. My name is Burcu again, from Brussels. Staying with the same topic, Sophie, your comments reminded me of a lecture that was held as part of the EU SME Days back in November, so about 6 months ago. And even though the whole topic was not about social entrepreneurship, it was actually about private sector SMEs and how to foster that. The main lecture, was going in the direction of your concerns. It was Johan Wiklund, a European professor at Syracuse University, and he was criticizing the Silicon Valley model for entrepreneurship, so private sector entrepreneurship, and he gave lots of different arguments supporting that basically Europe has followed the American system of the Silicon Valley, and he gave examples of the ecosystem that generates the same kind of idea. So, exclusive, extractive. Setting aside the question of the social entrepreneurship, different kinds of ownership, and focusing on the private sector ownership, for-profit companies, there's a lot more Europe can do to foster the kind of entrepreneurship and innovation that is in line with societal needs. And I think it was a very encouraging, fresh look. And I just wanted to emphasize that what you said was also shared there. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I'd love to get that name of the professor.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Any other questions, experiences, remarks?
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much. It's very nice discussion. It connects a little bit with the next panel. We're going to discuss a lot of these things. What I wanted to say and made me think about all this discussion is that it's a very important role for the intermediate organizations like your organization, probably, Sophie, and maybe even universities and so on. I have a lot of work to do in order to convince that this is a direction that we can travel towards, like the commons and so on. What I wanted to say is that not only to convince, public authorities at the local level, for example, which is of the obvious target, we have to convince the citizens. So we have to work, because if we work very good with the people and make people understand the need, then the politicians will listen to the people. But I think the problem is that we don't have the ear of the people yet. So that's a lot of work that needs to be done, but yeah. It's not a question, it's just a remark.
No, I think that's a very good point, and I think that's very hard, and I think it's not, I also think about that a lot, like how to do that, and yeah, I think it's, that's one of the reasons we started the association, is also because it's open and members can come, but it can't be campaigning, right? It can't be like doing a campaign. It needs to be more ingrained in, people in communities sharing this with each other. It needs to be mouth by mouth. It needs to, so that's a lot of work. A lot of people have to do together, I think, yeah. But at the same time, I think you do see the pendulum change. I do think a lot of people are fed up with this individualist ethos and are looking at some way, consciously or unconsciously, to community, for reciprocity, for doing something together, for spirituality, for something outside of this dominant culture.
Especially since this ethos has become so vocal in the other side of the Atlantic.
Yeah. My God.
Thank you. What an inspiring panel, really. And maybe I'll follow up on that question and ask Dimitra, because you are on the other side, right? Really immersed in the local and working with the citizens, co-creating with them the knowledge, the solutions, and the whole process. What would you need to make your work more become part of networks like the Commons Network? I mean, how do you expand and really connect with other initiatives like yours, or what would we all need to do for a more global outlook and a more translocal action, let's say, along the lines of what you have done on the ground?
I think what you're saying is really important, the networking, for sure. For us, just being here today and giving some space to talk and present our work through Ecoversity in Zagori, I think this is very important. And I will also mention something I think we all know, funding, of course, is really important, because you know, from theoretical for things to happen on the ground, need the time and energy and people working. And since all these kind of European programs support local projects, and I think it was a bit mentioned on the session before with your talk, so these programs support small projects that are really important, of course, and it's the first step for this kind of, for us, for local programs, is to start their networking and show that there is things to be done and successful stories. But since we are small NGOs, organizations, all of us who implement this kind of project, we constantly fight for the implementation of the project, but at the same time finding a new funding opportunities to continue this project, or at the same time other projects. So for sure this is a strong challenge that it's needed to be found a solution. I know that it's not easy, but maybe this kind of some kind of policies could make these fundings more manage to follow up the project. And I think, to be honest, acting is partly doing this because most of the European projects start, do what they need to be done, and then they say goodbye. So acting on our case is really helpful, that invite us for webinars and through your websites and everything. For us, it's really a small place like where we come from, to be shown even here in Brussels, but on your website. I think this is a very important thing, and to follow up with more seminars, webinars, whatever the conferences this might be, because I think this is where also the more opportunities come up, and this is also where networking is happening, and this is how also you disseminate our project, and maybe other similar challenges can find a small idea that they can implement in their area. So I think these two things are really important for sure. Support, economical support and networking. And of course, in the end, the research that you can help be done, it's a strong supporting thing for us, because we are there, we are on the ground, but it's, I can be doing research on the side, but it's really hard to be doing everything. So having big institutions like the partners of Acting to be doing all this research, leave behind some outcomes that can later be read and seen and heard by maybe policymakers or other funding institutions, or any kind of stakeholder maybe. So thank you, Acting, for this.
Thanks a lot to you, actually, because yeah, I mean, I can really say as a part of the Acting Consortium, I was always very impressed by the work that all of the pilot actions did with their time and resources that they had, and we've been trying to to do what you say, and it's really nice to hear that also part of the efforts are working to, and at the same time it speaks to the needed more long-term funding arrangement, also sustainable funding arrangements, etc., for civil society actors that are working on these issues on the ground, I think. Yeah, thanks. Yes.
So, as a communicator, I have a question for you, Sophie. You were talking about, about how to involve public and how to commons. You're saying that you don't do, it's not about campaigning, but how does your organization communicate? Do you do awareness raising information campaigns at all? Or do you have strategies to involve the public, to inform about the network? I'm curious.
Yeah. So there's Commons Network and there's Main Co-op, of which we're just a part, right? Main Co-op, it's an association of different organizations. And it's also in its first years. But we don't do, as Commons Network, we don't do campaigns, because that's a whole kind of line of business almost, right? We might support campaigns of other bigger NGOs or something sometimes, but like a real public campaign with posters in the city and I don't know, maybe ads and all that. That's also very expensive, and also need lots of skills. You need like communications officers and people who can do these things, right? And but what we do is, I think what a lot of organizations do. We publish quite a lot. We do publish reports and articles and blogs. So we're on social media. And we do events, we do public events. And that's also what we do with Main Co-op. We've had, in the last year, we were doing a few things, but one of the things that we're doing every month, for every 1.5 months, we're having a public event on a different topic in the city. So that you get to different communities, different topics, to also build network, build the village, build the. And otherwise, I don't think we do anything special apart from using all these different social media platforms and debating on whether it's still ethical to stay on the one and move to the other one. And I think that's.
I think we might have time for one, maybe two questions. One by Alan.
Yes, Alain Denis from the Acting Consortium. More a reflection following the debate and your contributions. And what we discovered, or the insights we had from acting, for me the reflection is that this is an important subject and that there is more to be done. So there is a space, and a space why? Because commons is so complex, so diverse. It's the air that we breathe, it's the oceans, it's the public space in our cities. It's an energy community, which is then another form of economy, as Sophie is saying. So it covers a lot of different aspects. But to me, the key point is what we noticed through acting, because we did not study the commons. They came to us through the cases that we were studying. So we saw their potential, because commons are inclusive by nature, but are not automatically inclusive either. So what COCOSA is doing with the urban gardens is an example. So you can do an urban garden and expect that it's a commons. It is a commons, but it's not necessarily inclusive. You need some other actions to make sure it is. So to me, it's clear that it's a subject on which much more can be done, and particularly how they can be stimulated. Because for centuries, we have been destroying the commons and privatizing, and we are at a moment that we notice, and what Toon Sawyer was saying us this morning, this need to go not back, but to the future with a different way of working. And the commons is a model that we can use in that process. and that can help us to innovate in a social way rather than in a greedy way, to use the words of Tunç again, but not for profit, but for value, value for the community. So really the impression that we need to work further on this, and we are all needed because of the complexity.
Thanks a lot for those reflections. Any last reflections or reactions to this from the panelists? If not, okay, we have one last question.
Thanks. Giuseppe from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. I just wanted to ask to Sophie, and also following what has just been said, regarding the commons, and more specifically actually about the community economy. We have seen not only a problem of privatization in the last decades, but also a problem of economies of scale destroying small businesses that often are at the core of communities. These meant that these small businesses, micro businesses, often disappeared from community, leaving essentially a desert in some small towns, in some small villages. And this clearly has compromised not only the income that was coming to these small communities, but also has wiped out some places of socialization, because sometimes these places were also places where people were meeting. And I was wondering whether there is any thought in your network about effective policies that could try to contrast this phenomena, if you have given a thought about that.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, I mean, for sure, and I think, of course, creating this idea of community wealth and creating, supporting basically local businesses and specifically cooperatives is addressing that as well. It really came from originally kind of, I guess it's called Rust Belt, a city, Cleveland in the US, where industry went away, or I don't know, it was the car industry or whatever it was, it left, and then you just had, desert of just no economic activity, and just, so then there was this initiative from the city to really, start these local businesses, leveraging the anchor organizations of the city, which could be a hospital or a bank, or to hire these cooperatives, right? To create, again, but there's also a part of community well-being is also to use public investment into local businesses, into local development. So in Preston, in the UK, where they have local pension funds, the pension funds invested into local project development. So there's just different ways. It's just really when you put on the glasses that you're able to do that with public finances and procurement, there's a lot of opportunities that arise, actually, because it's a lot of money, the public wallet, to stimulate the economy you want to see, and also to preference small businesses and to... And another aspect, and this is one part of it, this whole community well-building, that is a policy package, basically, to create community wealth. Another thing is the digital aspect, which we work on quite a bit, because a lot of what the problems you describe have to do also with digital infrastructures and ordering stuff online and things like that. So what we are actually actively looking into is digital commons, but also digital infrastructures for the community economy. So what are the infrastructures community economies need to organize themselves in a way that we're not dependent on Amazon and Uber, because we can build all this community economy we want. If we're still reliant on the infrastructures of monolithic, tech companies, we're never really gonna have it, right? So we're also looking at what are these infrastructures? Is it protocols? Is it software? And we're actually doing that research right now with community, and we've done quite a bit of research on it. So there's a whole world there, I think, of part of the answer is there.
Great. Then I would like to close the panel with one final question that's inspired by Alan just now. To leverage commons for a just transition, what do we need more of? to leverage commons for a just transition, which is the topic of the panel discussion. What do we need more of? And I'm going to be very mean and say answer in 1 to 2 sentences.
I think the key, I mean, it seems to me from the research, again, from acting research, solidarity building, community building, because if you look at the most vulnerable groups, even the ones who cannot afford to, let's say, initiate a local business, or let's say if they stay on their own, still coming together, helping them to build community, to develop a community in their vulnerable communities, let's say, or with other people as well. I think that is something that creates a great deal of empowerment, which also lay the ground for leveraging or creating a space for the commons to move towards a transition, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I have something to add to that. I think the word is support. Support initiatives, support each other, support, and I think this in collaboration, I would say. I don't know if you have something to add.
No, I think, I mean, I not so much. I think solidarity is indeed a key word. You said it. I think that's, and I hope that with the current circumstances, geopolitical circumstances, what is happening on the other side of the Atlantic, I hope maybe we are now, I think I feel it already, but I hope we will, here on this side of the Atlantic, and maybe, but you know, have more solidarity across societies to support each other in these things. Yeah.
Solidarity is the key word then. Thanks a lot to all three of you for this very interesting discussion. And to the audience for the participation. Colette, do you want to make some announcements?
So thank you very much. We are just to announce you that, first of all, that there is a recording of this conference, which will be available as replay as of next week. So if you had interesting things that you'd like to share with others, you'll have a video to share. Again, if you want to share your thoughts, please write a note on a post-it and post it on the wall over there. And we invite you to stretch your legs, have a short break, take refreshments over there, and we reconvene in half an hour at 4 o'clock.